probably just going to set us all up for heartbreak. So don't set it in a statement of work, for example, or make it part of your quality assurance surveillance plan. While you're executing, continually reinforce that estimation methods are there for their forward planning utility only. They're not an accounting tool. It doesn't matter how many points we said yesterday. Today we think it's this many points, and that understanding will change as we do the work, as we learn more about the domain, as other people build stuff around us and make everything more complex and harder. Estimates will creep up. And then finally, continually reinforce that progress is product. In fact, I think that's like in the Agile Manifesto, right? Working software is the best measure of progress. Not proxies for it, or proxies for it, like how many story points did we complete in a sprint. Okay. So we've got a little bit longer than I'm usually used to giving this talk in, so also feel free to stop any questions as we go and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so myth number 2, product owner is a title as opposed to a job. So what's a product owner supposed to be? I assume most of you already know this in the room, right? But product owner sits as the nexus of all these voices asking for stuff from a team. The team is there to tell that person how many of their wish list will fit into the next increment of time. The Scrum Master is supposed to be there to coach a realistic answer to that and make sure that backlog refinement is happening in front. Again, assuming we're doing Scrum. That is not, in fact, how it works most of the time. A lot of the times, product owner is a role or a title that whoever I'm doing the work for wants to own. But they also already have 8 other jobs. Right? And I don't know about you, I work for a whole lot of agencies who for years now have not been allowed to hire anybody. They can spend money on stuff, but they can't hire people. They can't spend money on people. So every time somebody dies or quits, you get a new job, right? Whatever Jim used to do, you are also doing now, right? So if I'm going to walk in and say, if you want to be the product owner, that's cool, but I need 7 hours of your time per day. You got to work with this team. They say, good luck, right? That's not going to happen. I'm the product owner for these 14 teams, or whatever it is. So that sets us up for heartbreak, right? Because no team, no matter how awesome they are, can outperform your product owner. Doesn't matter how good we are if we build the wrong stuff. So we need someone who knows the domain and has the authority to make decisions and will talk to us all the time. When that doesn't happen, bad things happen to us. So what does this look like in acquisition? How do we know we're walking into a bad situation? Vendor teams shall be assigned to government product owners to be determined after award. We have no idea who's going to do this work. We were frankly amazed that our accounting office let us approve this acquisition. We're going to kick it out to the street before they change their minds. The outcome is nobody owns the backlog, or even worse, everybody owns the backlog. I have a customer right now who, a company that shall remain nameless that we then bought, pitched a bunch of work. It was a very large scaled effort. It was like 18 teams as being safe, and we'll talk about safe later. But this customer had never had an Agile team before, ever, right? Let alone 18 of them. And they said, well, we'll clearly be the product owners. And the winning bidder said, yeah, sure, that's great, that'll be fine. So they just assigned people, right? Like somebody in Kansas, somebody in Texas, someone who somehow splits time between Alaska and Washington. State, not here. Right? So a bunch of folks had never been product owners before. Do you think they were any good at it? No, they were not. What do you think the customer did about it?
Fired it.
Promoted them to be program managers, which was not a thing that had existed in that customer before. Then they assigned new people to be product owners who also were not good at it. But now there were 2 people who supposedly owned that backlog, and actually none of them owned the backlog. And then we've inserted several other layers of management due to a myth we'll talk about next, I think. So at this point, in any given sprint, there's, depending on the team, like 2 to 5 people that think they have day-to-day control over what the team is doing, as opposed to the team making fixed commitments. And the weird thing about that kind of situation is that none of them have the ability to say yes. They can all say no, but nobody can ever actually approve a thing. So In execution, you know you've walked into this when you start hearing these things from the team. I don't know who my product owner is. Well, why don't? When did you last talk to them? Well, we had a guy, and then he took another gig in the organization, and they haven't gotten around to backfilling because they don't know if they're allowed to hire yet. Okay. My team has 2 product owners, a product manager, a program manager, and a product director. Okay, so another customer. We've been coaching there for a while. They actually have a dedicated coaching entity inside of the government institution who's responsible for helping new teams inside of that entity stand up. Awesome. Another vendor, so there's like 3 or 4 of us who are in there as vendors providing coaching support to this entity. And they're all pretty good folks. But then we have another vendor pushing from the outside in a different chunk of their CTO organization who's now pushing a notion of product direction rather than program management. We need product direction. Okay, so the new kind of fiat we're getting from on high is that from now on, because these systems need to talk to each other, teams have a product owner, they have a chief product owner, they have a product director, a program manager, and a program sponsor. Now, that alignment, if you read the responsibilities, basically someone took directly from like SAFe 4.0 of the various levels of direction, except in this customer, they intended to apply to single team entities. This is one team with like 5 layers of vision associated with it. These aren't scaled, right? They're not. It's not like I need one person thinking about forest and I've got all these other little guys thinking about trees. Like they're all looking at just this one team of like 5 people. Yeah, okay. So the outcome of this one basically is that value tends to never materialize, and also the team hates themselves. You get a lot of weird random hallway conversations about resume tips. Yeah. Also, I don't know about you, but I have this because I support a fair amount of scaled engagements. A lot of the people in my teams have never worked on other Agile teams before. This is their first one. Cool. Like, I'm sorry it's this one, but I'm glad you're getting some experience. And they always want to ask me, like, is it like this everywhere? Have you ever seen this work? Yes. If I'd never seen this work, I wouldn't do this for a living. Trust me, it can be better elsewhere. Okay, so what do we do about it? Get whoever's going to supply the product owner, get them to understand that this is a full-time job per team, and they need to be supported by a skilled, also full-time Scrum Master for at least as long as it takes for the team and the product owner to get to a high-performing state. Then maybe we can talk about sharing a couple of product owners across teams because they have the same domains and whatever else. Fine. I've just never seen that work out of the gate. Also, I've never seen a scenario be stable enough where I have that relationship to endure longer than about 12 months. This one might sound a little self-serving, as I happen to be a trainer and a coach, but get product owners training and coaching. It's amazing. It's also amazing when they get training, I'll take your question in a second, how often the training will say things like, and then prioritize your backlog. Moving on. Wait, how do I do that in a way that I'm allowed to build a consensus around and that will allow people to leave me alone long enough to finish a thing? Well, you just figure that out. No, there are tools, there are techniques. Give those people those tools and techniques. What were we going to say?
Yeah, on the first item there, shouldn't product ownership also mean that person is going to be full-time, they actually have domain knowledge about what the team is going to be building?
Yes, ideally.
Yeah.
However, I would say if I had to pick between understanding product ownership and understanding the domain, they can learn the domain easier.
Okay.
Right. There's another coach friend of mine who likes to say, if they're bad at that, we'll know real soon. Right? Because we've got enough transparency in the system that we'll figure out if we're listening to the right people. One would hope. So, this one seems to be the hardest for a lot of my customers, which is give the product owner absolute authority over what the team is going to do in 2-week increments. Allowing product owners to actually make and own choices seems to be a really hard thing for some of my customers. And not for entire agencies, it's really program by program inside of agencies. There's some places where that's absolutely fine, other places where it's not. And the notion that you're just going to make a decision like whether the banner should be red or blue without 12 weeks of consultation with various working groups is really amazing to them. It's never going to happen here. Well, how long would you like us to putz around before we actually build the thing, right? If it's wrong, it'll at least be working, and we can refine it a little easier than continuing to imagine whiteboard stuff. All right, and this last one also seems to be the biggest struggle I tend to find, which is that because the functioning and effectiveness of the team is directly tied to the ability of the product owner to do product ownership, they have to have a shared stake in the performance of the team. So I'll give you an example of this not happening. I was coaching a scaled engagement at an Intel customer. We were supplying all the teams doing the work. The customer was supplying product owners in the form of CETA resources. Does everybody here know what a CETA person is? I see a few people nodding, but a lot of head shaking. Okay, so CETA is like, I think the acronym is Special Expertise and Technical something or other. I don't know what the A is. But the idea is they're a contractor who acts on behalf of the government, and they're firewalled from ever doing the work so that there's not supposed to be a conflict of interest, right? Basically, that means that our product owners are a third-party vendor who's never allowed to bid on this work in any shape or form. The problem in that sense was a couple. One, they weren't good at being product owners. Also, though, they wrote our award fees. So anything we said in a retrospective would end up dinging us on award fee, which, when I got there, meant that the teams were having two sets of retrospectives, like a retrospective in front of these product owner people where everything was great, and then they would leave and they would actually talk about stuff. That felt shady, so we got that fixed. But also, we got the customer to understand that you can't hold us accountable for not delivering when we're waiting on the decision for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. If they won't make a choice, that's kind of out of our problem. The same way that you wouldn't hold us responsible because another chunk of your organization won't change a firewall, right? If that's not in our authority to do, you can't be mad at us for it. All we can do is visualize, here's our stumbling block. So what we had to do was visualize a bunch of the decisions we're waiting on all the time, showing how the product owners kind of a bottleneck because they wouldn't make a choice. And a lot of times, kind of getting back to that authority issue, they weren't making choices because they were inflating the stakes of their choices. They were thinking that they were making a choice for all time, right? So I have to make the right one. Except we're talking about 2 weeks of work, so if we're wrong, that's the maximum amount of risk. If you really did make the wrong choice, we can fix this. It's okay. We have lots of bites at this apple. That particular agency, they put satellites in the sky for a living, so they treat everything like a satellite. So, all decisions have to be made up front. Everything has to be validated before you go. That's it, that's it, that's it. And you have to keep reminding them, I understand for most things that's true, but this is an application to reserve a car. Like, we can fix it if it's broken. Like if the banners are the wrong color, we can change them. So, all right. Myth number 3, more awareness equals more control. So what's the difference? Just a level set language here. So awareness, I'm talking about knowledge of a pattern, what is happening. Control is the ability to do something about it. The problem is when we don't actually have the ability to change something, sometimes people get, especially management, gets in this awareness spiral where they just want to know more and more things. Tell me all the things, all the time. The goal of an Agile framework is to have both. The problem is I can't substitute one for the other. So knowing more about what's going on doesn't necessarily magically make me better able to change it if I don't have that authority. You see this tendency towards kind of the metrics or the awareness spiral of doom. Sometimes they signal it in the acquisition. So vendors shall monitor and report on, and then it's some list of 24 waterfall metrics. But this is Agile, so also I want Agile EVM and these other 20 process metrics that Accenture told me I should use or something. So we're reporting a whole bunch of things, which means that we're wasting a lot of money on process rather than value. We should be measuring what matters more than we should be measuring how much are we producing stuff, whether or not it matters. So in execution, you see things like this. Given our massive release failure the other day where we set everything on fire, from now on, I need all of the teams to count how many manual regression tests they run each day of the sprint. Okay, Or you hear things like this: I don't know why the deployment failed in prod, it worked in test. So we're wasting time measuring things that don't necessarily matter, but not measuring the things that do, because otherwise we would know why it worked in one environment and not the other. Right? If our problem is we don't have any automated testing, therefore we aren't doing enough testing because it's all by hand, making the manual testers also count how many tests they run every day means they're going to be running whatever the number is, it's less than yesterday. Also, what is the good number? What is the correct number of manual tests to run in a day? I don't know, so what are we measuring against? Is the goal just more? Okay, well now we're kind of back to that estimation points thing, right? So if the goal is tests, I can make tests. Doesn't mean the software will function, but I can test the crap out of it. All right, so money and time then get routed to overhead instead of product. The whole point of this was these were supposed to be lean systems in the first place. So how do we fix that? Focus awareness on the right things. Let your teams focus on measuring safety and demonstrating safety all the time as part of what they're doing. It needs to be reflected in definition of done, at all levels, or the story level, release level, whatever. Let management focus on measuring outcomes. And the fun thing about keeping management focused on measuring outcomes is they also tend to clarify a whole lot of issues of product ownership. So if we can agree up front on what are the actual quantifiable performance outcomes we're trying to reach, and then we prioritize based on those goals, then we can measure our performance against those goals, and the numbers we're talking about have real world meaning. The context is pretty clear. We stood down this system that used to cost a lot of money, and we stood up one that's way cheaper. That's an easy thing to talk about. This transaction used to take a minute and a half end to end, and now it takes 4 seconds. That's an easy thing to talk about and measure. All right, then use your metrics to inform your prioritization and increase control. So that means kind of the notion of an architectural runway, right? So that might mean doing things that are transparent to users, don't necessarily result in new features for them, but allow us to have a better understanding of what is going on with our systems and applications, so that we know where they break or where they're slow. And then finally understand that as often as waste is created, it's often inherited. Just because we inherited it doesn't mean we have to perpetuate it. Go ahead.
How do you mean measuring safety?
So measuring safety. So for example, what are the difference between my environments across the life cycle? So what does a failure in one tell me? If I don't know what the environments are, I've got 5 of them, but I couldn't articulate to you the actual difference at any one moment between test and stage and int or whatever else, then success or failure doesn't tell me anything. Right, so that might mean we're gonna not build new chunks of product for a couple of sprints so we can stand up some new piece of our continuous integration or continuous deployment pipeline so that my developer will know within minutes whether or not a change will break prod, rather than waiting months until we actually try a release. Yeah. Any other questions on that one? All right, moving right along. Number 4, we can say teams, but we can actually stay people. All right, so what's an Agile team supposed to be? Whatever your life cycle, whether it's a day or a month or a year, and however many stages you have in it, you can probably abstract it into these kind of 4 activities. What is the thing we're trying to do? Okay, go do it. Validate that it worked, and then put it into prod, and then run it. What we're really trying to do is answer 2 questions all the time. The less exciting question is, does it work? Which hopefully is a question the team can answer for themselves. Once we established, yes, it works, now we're trying to answer, did we meet the need yet? Are we done? An Agile team's responsibility is really supposed to be the does it work question. This is what they should own in terms of authority. So they're planning and committing as a group based on the vision that's set for them by however product ownership is being done. That means that the team needs to be cross-functional, right? This is a pretty core concept to Scrum and most other Agile frameworks. Whoever does what in the team, that team as a unit has all the skills they need to release something deliverable, right? To go from idea to production. And then they self-organize to execute the plan. And then they meet their commitments as a group or they don't. That doesn't always happen, especially when we're doing Agile as a service for a government. Pardon my hiccups as I slammed salted water. Try to keep my voice up. So it doesn't work for a lot of reasons. And sometimes vendors do it to themselves. Sometimes it's set up like this in the contract. So here's some bid language. Yeah, we're totally going to give you agile teams. We'll give you as many as you want. Here's a fixed price per team per month or per year or whatever. This is the team composition that we came up with after losing 4 arguments with our price to win people. Each team is going to have 0.15 FTE of a business analyst, 3.4 developer SMEs, 0.6 of a tester. What does that tell you?
Not self-organizing.
Not self-organizing, why not?
It's all prescribed.
It's all prescribed, right? We got fixed roles in this team. What else does it tell you?
They also have they believe they know what they need.
Yeah.
Like the output that they need from the team.
Yeah, we already know exactly who needs to be on this team. What else does it tell you?
Doesn't talk about being cross-functional.
Doesn't talk about cross-functional. There's one really big important part.
You've got a 16th of like 5 teams there.
Yeah, right? Nobody is on this team full-time. They're all on at least a couple of other teams. Some of them might be spread across 20 teams. So none of them have domain knowledge about just that one product that they're building or those couple of applications they're supporting. Also, it's how easy is it to plan out? This is a resource view of people, right? So I'm going to call them resources in this example, even though we're never supposed to do that in Agile, because whoever wrote this is clearly thinking of them as resources, right? Like printers. So how easy is it to plan out a sprint with 0.6 of a person? Well, this sprint, I'm going to be more on that other team than this one, but I might be able to do this. But you're the tester. Aren't you supposed to touch all the things? Oh, but Agile's fine because they're going to be cross-functional. So however we sold them up front, they're going to get cross-functional, right? Well, probably not, for a lot of reasons. And one of the biggest ones is that these divisions get locked into labor categories in the bid when we respond to the proposal. So even if I somehow do get to a point of having an awesome, self-organized, cross-functional team, somebody leaves for whatever reason. Get a better job, whatever it is. They used to be, that person that left was an awesome, at this point, full stack, whatever, developer or testing SME with a little bit of development, because they've been doing pair programming and cross-training with all of my other team members for a year, except now I can only replace them with a tech writer, because that's what they were slotted in as, right? The customer's saying, I know we need a Java developer, but this says tech writer. Okay, right? So, yeah. You might also see something like this. At the end of each sprint, the development team will deliver a completed product increment to the testing team. What does that tell you?
It's not Scrum.
It's not Scrum. Why is it not Scrum? Let's forget about Scrum. It's not really even Agile. Right? Forget about specific flavor.
Well, because, so at least the way that I always perceive this is my question is always who has the ultimate authority to say no. If it's a testing team outside of my team doing the development, then they're the product owner.
Yeah. So this, by the way, I just found out is the currently official version of how Agile will be done at Customs and Border Protection. This is their enterprise process coming down from the CIO shop. What if both of these teams are awesome and everything the development team does will pass testing? What is the shortest period of time that they can deliver a touchable product?
2 sprints.
2 sprints. What is the probable length of time before they deliver a touchable product?
More.
Many more, whatever it is, right? And the real problem with this is that I would kill in some of my engagements to only have this 2-team cycle.
Right.
It's often 4, right? It's like the development team, then there's 508 accessibility, then there's IDV, and then there's manual testing, which is some group out in Phoenix that we never met. So, and their timelines aren't even in my direct customers, so we can't even like lean on them and yell at them. So there's some agileness in the middle for build, and then we throw it into a hole. And then when it comes out of that queue, it goes into another hole. I just kind of got strong-armed into helping a customer do a release train planning event. They're pretending that they're safe. Where I'm a little embarrassed to say this out loud. Program increment, does anybody here do safe? Okay, how long is the program increment supposed to be typically?
6 sprints and an IP sprint.
Yeah, quarter, right? 3 months-ish, whatever, give or take 1. They just planned a program increment They conflate program increment and release. It's 15 sprints long.
Wow.
Whoa.
6.5 of those are build, and the rest is deal with being told whether or not we're allowed to deliver for all their other teams.
Well, I have to give them mad props though, because they're dealing with the reality of the situation.
They are
Right?
at least admitting
We're
the current
done,
reality is-
and it's going to take us.
Yeah. On a day-to-day basis, you know, if we look at the way this is in execution, you know, nobody can really plan or execute reliably. If any stakeholder says, when will I get my thing? The answer they get back isn't the answer they asked for. The answer they get back is, the development team will be done in a couple of sprints. Well, when will I see it? Who knows? We can show you a demo version of it, but you won't get that on your desk for a long time, right? So, yeah, and you know, the best case scenario here is like day to day, you end up in this yo-yo pattern where you think you finished some stuff, but you don't really know. And then at some point, someone will come back and tell you it's not really done. But you've moved on and you're working on new stuff. So you're always picking some things back up and putting some other things down, back and forth, and no one really knows. So that's pretty uncomfortable. In execution, so that's an execution, and that's up front. I mentioned before some of these things kind of interact with each other. If we push this, I know I said you're a team, but really you're people at the end of the day, you're individuals. Down to the management level for teams, we see stuff like this. I need to know how many story points each team member completes each sprint. It's never, I know that nothing good will ever come of a meeting invite I receive as a coach that says quantifying individual team member effort. And I've gotten it surprisingly often. For your performance review, please quantify your individual contribution to the success of the overall effort. So, think about how your own companies do performance reviews. This is still how mine does it, right? Thanks for being part of our awesome Agile teams on customers and succeeding, that's great. You've been making our customers really happy. Now, for you to get a raise, I need to explain to me how you're more awesome than your teammates. Because I have one bucket of money. So, it can be even worse, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But basically, the game has changed from deliver value continually to just outrun your coworkers. Do you think there's any pair programming going on in an environment like this? No, because that's my job security. The more knowledge I can silo inside my own head, the more they have to keep me on. Well, thanks, you're the really expensive senior dev though. I would like you to train up this junior guy. No! You, write the documentation. For what? I don't know. Because I'm not going to explain how this works. So good luck, right? Nobody wins. So how do we get around it? Get the stakeholders, both vendor and customer side, to understand why Agile teams outperform command and control structures. What are the stakes for the decisions we're worried about? Why do we need a project manager to tell people what to do in 5-minute increments? That's a pretty limited value activity. There are other things maybe that project manager could go do. I'm not saying we don't ever need those people. Maybe we call them something else. All right. Focus performance measures on outcome delivery by the group. If you've got one pool of money, make it clear to the team that they all have a stake in the success of that team. We'll figure out a way to share that in a way that makes sense, and in a way that doesn't accidentally make them competitors rather than teammates. And then finally, you know, this goes to the old thing about let's get away from the notion of carrot and stick for performance. We get to that mastery, autonomy, and purpose model. We tend to get people who actually are continually self-improving, or even better, continually group improving, rather than just the continual threat of whether or not you get a raise. The worst example of this I've seen, you know, when I hired into CSC 3 years and change ago, we had at the time this vice president for HR who had like a management manual from like 1982 underneath her bed. And every once in a while she would like have a bad dream and then wake up and reach for the book and pull out some horrible idea that everyone debunked 20 years ago. And one of them was, from now on, all managers must force rank their employees into 3 buckets. Exceeds expectations, meets expectations, below expectations. 25%, 50%, 20%, 25%. Okay, So what's the difference? Well, it exceeds, you get a raise and a bonus. Meets, you get a raise, kind of. Below, you get a stern talking to. Okay. And then year 2, it was, we're going to do the same thing, except if you're in below again, you're fired. And from now on, if it happens twice, you're fired. That's a problem, because the first year, who did I not give a raise to? The guy at the top of the salary band that I can't give a raise to under the current contract. Jim, I'm sorry, you're awesome, but there's no way I can pay you more in this current contract. It's okay, I get it. Give the raise to the kid, it's fine. Okay, cool. Whoops. Now I just have a black mark on that dude's record, and if anything happens again, he's gonna get fired. Actually, if he is a rock star, he just leaves, which is what happened to us. We lost a ton of good talent because people were like, I don't want to work like that. One of my other kind of passion topics to talk about in terms of coaching is servant leadership. And one of my favorite examples actually is from this scenario. The guy I hired under at the time when I came to CSC, he was running this giant applications development group. So we were organized by matrix. If you were a developer, probably one way or the other, you rolled up to this guy. He's got, I don't know, at the time, 500 or 600 reports if you roll it up. And Ed just said, we won't do that in my organization. You have to force rank all your people. No. You know what happened to Ed? Nothing. Nothing at all. And every year we would do performance review time, and all of his managers would freak out. I got this thing from HR that says I have to put my people in these buckets, and Ed would just say, we don't do that. Don't worry about it. Know what happened? The thing though is that Ed didn't know nothing would happen. One of his peers also said we won't do that, and they walked him out that day. Right? So that's about going to bat for your people. Show them that you will do that. All right, last one, and then we can have a conversation. So myth number 5, safe will save you. I am not the world's greatest fan of safe. I'm not particularly evangelistic about any one particular framework. To me, they're tools, you use the one that fits. But the notion here for safe, if you're not familiar, is I've got one Scrum team that's, let's say, 3 to 9 people, plus a Scrum Master, plus a product owner, versus how do I be an organization of like 700 people while trying to build the same thing? That's what SAFE is for, right? SAFE is for, we are not building an application with a team. We are Microsoft building Microsoft Office. And I've got a couple of teams who work on the printing room, and I've got one team over here that just does Excel, and one team over there that just does PowerPoint, and then these other 3 teams are doing shared services, and then I've got security, and I've got whatever else. So we're going to deliver value organized by value stream, and then inside of the value stream I have 1 or more release trains of teams, which might be 50 to 140-ish people in each train. Those trains are then cut up into programs, and the programs consist of actual Scrum teams all the way down at the bottom. I will give the SAFE folks a bit of credit if you've not been following. We're now on version 4.5 of their framework. And the real difference was from 3 to 4, they added a layer. So it went from a 3-layer thing to a 4-layer thing. The difference between 4.0 and 4.5 was they admitted that everyone has to figure this out for themselves. And so now it's like a choose your own adventure. Like you look at this big chart and you click boxes about which layers you think apply to you that you need. Which is how we were all doing it anyway. So like, good job. Embrace reality, good job.
And they halted on lead startup in the bottom left corner, just because they could.
Right, well, yeah, it's SAFE contains everything, just ask them.
They are the PMBOK of Agile.
Yeah.
But not really.
Now, the problem with SAFE in this town is that I don't have any customers that I've worked with that need it. What I have are customers that control a bunch of budget. So they think they need SAFE because, well, I control 40 teams. You control 40 independent teams that have nothing to do with each other. They work on different applications, they serve different customers, they have completely different life cycles for how they deliver, they have different budget lines, they have all the different ways that we can differ. They aren't the same program, they aren't the same value stream, they aren't part of the same release train. So why impose this alignment and management structure on them, making them to pretend to be teams? Or worse, they do have a bunch of interdependencies on teams that are outside of that customer. Like we all depend on some infrastructure group which answers to somebody else, and we can't make them attend our planning events. Awesome, right? So That doesn't, however, stop Dean and his guys from running around and telling everybody they need safe, they need safe, they need safe. And I have a lot of customers that like it also because this rhythm of like, we're all gonna get together and plan 4 times a year feels a lot like the way they used to do things too, where they aren't really involved with us every day like we want them to be. So they kind of like that, and they get all these reports, and there are boards and dashboards, which makes them feel like they know stuff, and they confuse awareness with control. Like I said, these things kind of confound, right? That means that you end up sometimes seeing things like this in acquisition. Vendors shall propose a safe-based methodology to plan, organize, and execute this work, which when we price it out is 12 people. GSA did this to me once. We want the vendor to do safe. This is 12 people worth of work. Vendor will propose safe. We'll do a safe-like thing, not down selected. Booz Allen said, okay, we'll do safe. They said, you're hired. Good luck. I have no idea how it's going. So the outcome is either the vendor pretends to do safe in the proposal, or we don't get sound selected. That's your choice. Yeah.
Does safe allow you to tailor it?
Does kind of now. Prior to this, the only real tailoring was, do we need the value stream layer or not? Do we need this layer 2? You have to have 1, 3, and 4. Yeah. Also, it
So
doesn't.
it's all or nothing pretty much?
That's how it used to be. Now it's more like you're going to have a portfolio layer on top, and you're going to have teams on the bottom. What you have in between is more kind of up to you. So you choose essential safe, or you choose portfolio safe, or my favorite is full-blown safe, because then it sounds like the phrase like, that guy's got full-blown whatever. Right? That's
When
what
they
it
get to
looks
5.0, you'll break the API, so it's going to have like another one.
like. Service-oriented safe is what we're going to,
Fully
microservice.
blown, full blown.
All right. So yeah, in acquisition, that's your choice. If you're bidding on this opportunity, if you didn't shape this ahead of time to tell them they don't really need this, right? There isn't room in the proposal stage to go tell them what you really need is less. You don't maybe even need less. You just need portfolio practices, and then you need solid team practices in this particular engagement. Maybe that's all we need. But there's no room to have that conversation because they already determined that they need safe. You got to get in there in front of that. In execution, you start to hear things like this. We've scheduled a PI planning event with all the front end, the business layer, and the database teams. Oh, well, okay. Probably those are in the same value stream because none of them can deliver without the other ones. But we missed all the stuff about cross-functional and teams that can deliver independently. We're just basically putting safe furniture around a waterfall kind of matrix process. Yeah. It's really hard to plan our program increment because none of our teams are meeting their velocity targets. So we don't know what to put in the planning increment. Which means we're driving some notion about like what points mean to the metric for how teams should behave, but then we're clinging still even to that to unrealistic expectations, and then that's screwing us up all down the line, right? This one sentence points out to me like 1,200 major dysfunctions that I'm not going to fix as their coach, right? Yeah, it's gonna be a real fun engagement. Outcome is we probably aren't delivering anything faster or cheaper or better than we were before, but we probably are spending more money to do it. Because before, we had teams and a project manager per team and a program manager. And now I've got a program portfolio board, and I've got a value stream engineer, or whatever we call it now, and a release train engineer, and I've got individual scrum masters, and I've got team level product owners, and then I've got product managers at the program level, and I've got product directors at the value stream level. Also, by the way, I as the coach have to have like 12 meetings trying to map their existing roles to these things. And we never get rid of the outmoded roles. Those people just stick on. Anyway, yeah. So how do you do that? Understand when to scale. Understand if you are scaled. And this one kills me a little bit, but get experience with one successful Agile team before we add some more.
Right.
If we knew what one good team looked like, scaling wouldn't be as daunting. But instead, I've now got 18 teams that have never been teams before. No one knows how to do this. No one knows if they're running in the right direction. All we know is that all of them set prod on fire every time we try to release. Cool. Assume continual coaching for anything that has scale. There are some customers out there that are now stipulating, not so much, I haven't seen this in actual RFP language, but I've had this in conversations with them when we're talking about opportunities, where they say, we assume you'll have some coaching associated for a new team, but we can't see that that person would stay on for more than a couple of sprints. And we feel like if you need coaching, you're just not any good at this as a company. But you've got 18 teams, Mark Schwartz. Like, why wouldn't we have continual coaching? Because we're always going to have people rolling on and rolling off. These teams are constantly reforming just because the enterprise is so large. We're going to be constantly trying to figure out how do we solve problems that are bigger than a team. Like, how do we talk better with this infrastructure group that we don't control because we can't build anything without servers and you're still running on bare iron servers? So I will tell you, I got a customer who finally just fixed that. They're moving to VMs finally. It's awesome. You know how many VMs they're allowed to put per server?
2, 1. Yeah. Yes. That's even better.
A plus. Good job, guys. There's a really nice dent in my desk, the size of my head. Anyway, and this is the big one for me. Prioritize descaling as your #1 architectural runway item. If you are scaled because you have these teams that are dependent upon each other, part of how you get better as an enterprise is figuring out how they can be more federated. What do we need to do to not step on each other's toes all the time so we don't need to coordinate so closely? Because all that coordination, another word for it is risk. If we get more independent, we get faster. That's not unsafe. They never say, this is what you need up front, but then down the road you look like this. They walk in and they say, this is what you need up front, and it's fine. And we're just going to stay like that forever. That's a lot of overhead. All right. So that's my 5 minutes. Let's talk. Go ahead.
So I have a question. I work with the government in Agile Scrum. So all the problems you mentioned are correct. But what's the solution to that? I mean, how do you, from your point of view, how do you see this improved in the past few years?
Well, so
As vendors, what can we do? Because if the customer is demanding and they think they're doing Agile, but they're not,
yeah.
then what can we do?
So the biggest thing you can all do as a favor to yourselves is, first of all, if you are executing as an Agile team somewhere today, do it for real. Do it as real as you can do it, and make sure the customer understands where they're sacrificing for expediency or for whatever else, right? Where you are working with a customer to win new work, get them to understand the real, whatever it is. Get them to understand how Scrum is supposed to work. Get them to understand the intrinsic issues of scale. Get them to understand what product ownership is as a role in the team and why it's so important and why it takes so much effort. Right?
I mean, on that front, I mean, it's a proposal. I mean, got in some proposals. You cannot interact, I mean, not always, you cannot interact with the customer. It's just, you ask questions and give answers.
Yeah, if you're, yeah, you can't fix this at the proposal stage. You either got to fix these misunderstandings before proposal, like at RFQ stage or RFI stage or earlier, right? Or you have to fix it after you've won the work, which is harder sometimes, if these things have been entrenched, right? But even just like the bare nature of how do we buy and sell the work, for example, right? Getting them to understand the easiest way to do this is to think of yourself as buying teams rather than widgets for a period of time. So let's make this a cost plus award fee in small increments if you don't know us yet. 6 months. IDIQ with 3 months task orders, whatever it is. Go ahead.
Question. So why, in your opinion, aren't the compliance and regulatory components of the government more forceful in trying to ensure compliance?
I don't know. I don't really have any window into that. And then also we have the competitiveness problem, right? So there's a lot of integrators in this town, right? We're all trying to win work and get in there. And one of the ways that we stay in there is whatever Agile meant before we walked in the door, now we're going to define what it means so that we have a competitive competitive advantage. And often that is a bunch of stuff that is not actually real, right? Agile is these 700 metrics that we're all going to keep track of that have nothing to do with whether or not a team is successful. But now that's going to be part of our bid structure. And if I'm the subject matter expert consulting with whoever the compliance body is for that customer, that stuff starts getting inserted in the contract. So that's part of the problem. Also, part of the problem is that all of the things we say about realism and truth in Agile planning, right? So like fixed scope or schedule, but not both, give contracting officers heart attacks. Because they've been told for the last 20 years, the problem is you are not controlling cost and schedule enough. So they want things spelled out as widgets. The government is buying this, and this. But we can't actually plan any of that stuff. And we don't know that any of that stuff is what you actually want yet. Well, too bad, right? So when I started doing Agile on teams, all of my contracts were from fixed price. Part of how we were allowed to do it was either through vagueness in the statement of work that let us do what was needed to meet the high-level contractual requirement, or more often and better, through having a contracting officer and a contracting officer's technical representative, who is, in Homeland they're called COTARs, and other places they're called KOs, or whatever it is. The person who's charged with telling the government whether or not the work is acceptable, right? I need those people to like each other and return emails. Because we're going to be doing a bunch of no cost, no schedule changes to the scope as the government gets to change its mind about what's necessary today. And as long as that's okay with the contracting officer, we're fine. If they hate each other, that's not going to work. Because we're going to be doing what the customer wants, but then this contracting officer is going to be holding the customer to whatever was negotiated 5 years ago that we all know is out of date. Has anybody else here ever needed to integrate two systems and the target system ceases to exist before you're done? I still have to build the thing.
What?
Firm fixed price contract.
Say that again?
So my job was to integrate system A with system B so they could talk to each other.
Uh-huh.
System B was owned by a different agency. They defunded it before we were done.
Okay.
Still had to build the integration. Digital bridge to nowhere. It's awesome. We built it. Great.
Right? It's interesting. I mean, all the true values of Agile is non-existent in this town.
It can be.
Trust is like through the contracting things. I haven't seen that in the last 5 years move anywhere. Really producing value, very little of that's coming out.
It depends a lot. Like I say, right? So government isn't a monolith. And I don't want to give too depressed a picture. If I've never seen this work anywhere, like I say, I wouldn't still be here still doing it. Where it's worked the best is where we are a trusted partner of that particular program.
Yeah, so then trust comes back in,
Yeah.
delivering value comes in, respecting each other and talking
Right.
through it. Yeah, I mean, I've also done, not recently, but I've also done some work in the federal space, and it was great when we actually got it going to a certain degree until they stopped the program and the person who was keeping the space for Agile they left, who was a federal person.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed.
So I mentioned an engagement I was coaching for an Intel customer, right? The weird thing about that particular Intel customer who's down the road is that they don't have any employees. Anybody else here? You don't have to raise your hand, but if you don't know anything about the NRO, you can know this because it's on Wikipedia. Nobody works at the NRO. They're all detailed. From Air Force, from CIA, from wherever else. So nobody is in that building at that chair for longer than 2 years. Often they're only detailed for a single year. That makes it really hard to build a relationship of trust with this person when they're not going to be there that long. They don't know the domain, right? You do, because those clearances are hard to get. So we've been there working in one capacity or another. I mean, I've got people, at the time I had people who've been sitting at the same desk through 5 acquisitions of contractor. So they've been working for 30 years on more or less the same program. They knew everybody, they knew who to call, but they're constantly trying to re-educate this person who's supposedly calling the shots. And you mentioned trust, right? That goes both ways. It's not just that they don't necessarily trust us to deliver. It's also that all of my programs, all my product owners, there's this invisible backlog item at the top of the backlog. It says, keep me out of the Washington Post. Whatever you do, don't screw up so badly that I end up being reported to the GAO, right? Or OIG is in here running investigation on me, which means that they tend to exist in pretty risk-averse environments, right? So, I mean, in that particular example, all my detailees ever wanted was to finish this detail and go home, right? They want nothing remarkable on the record, so the detail looks like a success. They can go back to their real job in a year, whatever it is. So there's a question about that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, very good presentation, thank you. I was just thinking while you were saying that Agile's been here around for like 20 years, at least mainstream 10 years, I would say, in this area. And if this is the level of maturity we have in government agencies, how effective is the Agile coaching there? And has there been any success stories? And do you see any improvement in the last few years?
All over the map. Okay, so I think I said at the beginning, right, that like when I started doing Agile, none of my customers knew what it was, right? Which meant also that we kind of have freedom to go do whatever we
Right.
wanted. Because they didn't care, as long as we were delivering. They didn't care if we were Scrum, and even if they knew we were Scrum, they didn't care if we were doing Scrum right. They just wanted us to be doing work right. Coaching has kind of gone through the similar progression, a couple of years delayed. So like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, coaches were mostly people who had coached and had reputations in the private sector. Now coaches are like anyone who's been through a certified Scrum Master class and then applied to my vacancy. I read like, depending on the week, I end up reading typically between like 5 and 40 resumes a week, trying to place coaches on programs and Scrum Masters and things like that. And everybody's a coach now. Have you ever been on an Agile team? No. Wait. Right? In fact, I had a guy from my own company a year ago apply for a coaching spot at a program I support up at Social Security. So standard first question, like, so tell me about your Agile journey. Like, where have you been a Scrum Master? Well, I've never been on an Agile team per se. I was like, well, whatever he says next is going to be awesome. And I could never have predicted it. His next sentence was, but I did write the Agile process architecture for us.
Wow.
That's why it sucked. No, I know.
Right?
I've been telling everyone to ignore it for my entire time here, and now I know why.
Well, but in that defense, given how many times I have restarted so many things in my life, right? Somebody's got to go first.
Yeah. It's okay to try something new, right? But like, if I'm advertising for an enterprise coach with 20 years of experience, well,
Right, that's
I'm not going to
not-
get 20 years of actual experience, but I just want someone who's coached for, let's say, 3 years, and before that, been on a team for more than a year. Ideally, worked in more than one role on a team before. And instead, I get these folks that like they're project managers for 20 years, or they're developers for 20 years, and have never even been on a team. Now might be a good time for you to be on a team, but you're not a coach. Because what are you going to do? You're going to walk in and be like, well, the pamphlet says.
Right?
You're not doing this, that, and the other thing.
Or we need Gantt charts.
Yeah. The big scaled customer I was working with, I got an email a couple months ago from their CTO shop saying, we have hired Agile coaches and we would like to make them available to programs, and we hear you guys are having trouble. Would you like to meet with our Agile coach? I said, do they know that I'm the Agile coach here? Fine, I'll go talk to their Agile coach. And I'm talking to this guy, and his knowledge is like not real deep. But still, like, I'll make it nice and talk to him. He's so familiar. I'm like, I did not hire you 3 months ago for one of my jobs. And now you're here telling me what to do. This is awesome. Great. Cool. Okay. You know, like, so this is a big program. They're supposed to be safe, right? All these teams have never had a single team before. And his big idea was, have you tried value stream mapping? If I just come in and run this workshop, everything will be fine. No. It won't, because
Right.
half of our value stream is beyond the wall of this customer. So do you have a magic stick to go make those other agencies play with us? Because they control the hardware. Well, no. All right. See you later. Good luck. Have you tried training everyone? Yeah, we trained them. I don't think the problem is that they haven't, seen. Where is it? The problem isn't that they haven't looked at this chart enough. That's not the issue. What else? Stay. Yeah.
Alan J. So I work at GSA. I work right in the heart of the procurement engine there, the Federal Acquisition Service. So I have visibility into what's likely to change in this whole scenario as far as the contracting world and that. And our team has just inherited the head of 18F, which in GSA is a group that's trying to bring agility to contracting and help state agencies and federal agencies change that picture to something that could actually work. So there's hope for the future.
Appreciate that.
I will tell you, yeah, so, when people talk about what's the difference between public sector and private sector, right? I think the real missed opportunity of the 18F folks was not understanding kind of where the bright lines were about what's different in government. So it's not that agencies don't want agility. It's not that agencies don't want cool new technology. But we had 18F people walking in going, the problem is you're not doing CI/CD. We should know within the sprint whether or not stuff fails or works. Cool, I agree. Except this is a bundle of 400 mainframe applications written in COBOL.
Yeah,
Right.
So
And that's-
where we are.
How am I going to do that?
Because for me, being a government contractor is one, walking into an agency and not being willing and able to accept where they actually are.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I know all the cool tech that we can do, right? We can't do that, right? We don't have the skills, we don't have whatever, we're not there yet. And the second problem, going to your point as well, the contracts aren't set up to facilitate that capability.
Yeah.
Right? Even some of the high-level SOWs that we see, even those, it's like, okay, now you're too vague, and nobody knows what I'm supposed to be doing, even
Right.
my product owner.
Right. Which is a problem. Like, I understand the contracting officer's worried, right?
Right.
Like, the other thing, not to harsh on the ATF guys, especially since most of them aren't with us anymore, the other thing we were really good at was getting procurements disbarred for asking bad questions in orals. They were really good at accidentally basically blowing up bids and procurements by doing things in examinations and reviews and orals that you're not allowed to do, right? So, and that's kind of a little bit, I mean, that's really on them for just not understanding that there are some rules we have to have. So I don't know. It's amazing what stakes will do. A lot of my toughest challenges are in programs where it's really hard to explain the value of the work to people outside of that agency. Where the consequences are clearer and a little more life and death, often we get a lot more latitude to just go do the right thing. But that's not always the case. It's just kind of a theme. Go ahead.
Again, thank you. It's a very interesting presentation. And I don't have any government experience. I've only been in the last company I was with that was the private sector. But just to give you an idea, I mean, it wasn't all rosy, just even there. Because the first thing that happened was our CTO came in, wanted to do it because he was from California, change everything, and everybody got trained on the development team. And then when we first started it, brought in product and said, okay, you need to write the stories. And they're like, what are you talking about? Because of course they weren't trained on everything, and it takes time, but still, even in the case of, even once you got the dev team and the product owners working, we still had the problem constantly with finance to try and get them to understand what we were doing, and that we couldn't predict what was going to be done at the end of the year because that wasn't the whole point. We had to justify everything. And so it doesn't, they're different problems. Maybe there's some easier things that can happen, but still it's not all like roses.
Yeah, and also where some of those prior patterns are really entrenched, part of the challenge of getting somebody to get around that pattern is they have to admit that whatever they were doing before was partly lying.
Just what?
Partly lying, right? So like if you think about PMBOK, if you think about like 1,000-line WBS Gantt charts or whatever, well, I've never been late. I'm always on time, on schedule, on cost with my projects. How'd you do that? 30% fudge factor in the planning, right? Well, that's, the safe guys will say, that's trading dollars for certainty. And if we come along and we say, okay, we're not going to lie anymore, that's really threatening. Because then we have to admit that everything up to that point is kind of fake. Right? That's why I hate earned value management. I can make the numbers say whatever I want. And Agile EVM is even worse. Now we're really going to
You use that term,
what?
Agile EVM. I've given a few little speeches. I would say kind of the opposite. Wouldn't you consider, Agile by itself? If you're doing Scrum, you're kind of doing EVM, right?
If you're doing Scrum, I shouldn't need like a weird mathematical proxy to tell me whether or not I'm making progress.
Right.
Well, no, I'm agreeing.
Like,
because
I'm-
if you
right.
hit your sprint
Delivering
objective, you
real
hit your
product
earned
every
value
sprint.
equals your plan value, right?
Yeah. That's, yeah, theoretically, right? The same with
Yes, sir.
work breakdown structures. Well, if I have to have one, if I have to have this Gantt chart, fine. It just is chunked out in 2-week sprints. It's really easy to write. But I can't say what's going to be in the sprints. But I don't know when things will be finished. But I can plan out the year that way, and the other kind of like secret I will give you to government Agile, for those of you that have to do it, is where it looks like there's a ton of bureaucracy in your way around some, especially performance or compliance issue. Remember that most of the time, no one cares what it is. They just need a box to be checked. Anybody here work in Homeland ever? DHS stuff? A couple hands. Okay. It's been a while, so I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but when I was doing Scrum in Homeland years back, the thing I kept running up against all the time was this thing called the software development lifecycle, which was their version of software engineering lifecycle. So it was a 9-stage process, usually waterfall assuming. The first 7 stages amount to justifying spending money on a thing. Step 8 is build the thing and run it, and step 9 is decommission it, right? So I'm only there because it's step 8, right? You can't hire us until it's step 8. You would think, right? So you've got all this SDLC documentation and everything somewhere, except then one day I'm pushing a change through DHS's change control board. I'm going to make some change for a production application. And all the components are on this one call every week, and they get to veto somebody else's changes if it's going to negatively impact them and they aren't ready. But most of the time, no one knows who the hell you are, and they don't care what your application is. So, that's what you want is silence, right? So I'm going to do this. Anybody got a problem? Cool, we're done, right? Except one day, where is your tailoring plan for your SDLC documentation for this system? And I said, my what? Which was not the right answer, apparently. Because I had never heard of it. I had to learn real fast. Well, we're going to tentatively approve this change today, but we need to see your tailoring plan within 3 months, or we're not going to be able to approve any further changes. So now I got to figure out what a tailoring plan is. A tailoring plan is a mapping of here are 400 template artifacts, and you have to tell them which ones you need and how you're going to fill them out. Well, I'm a PhD, so that means I have a fair amount of training in bullshit. So I wrote a tailoring plan that says, none of this applies to me. And they said, great. All we cared about. No one cared what was in my tailoring plan. They just needed it to exist. Done. Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's about the similar issue with the government. Red tapeism, basically, you try to deliver sprint.
Yep.
But they have their own side, they have their own culture for approval and change.
Mm-hmm.
They don't approve anything in one day.
Mm-hmm.
There are different stages to be approved.
Yeah.
TCAP, SCCV. So
Yeah.
how do you address those things to fit into?
So value stream mapping is your friend. Show them what is the actual whole life cycle, not just your chunk of it, and time it out for them so they understand, here are all the weights, here are all the bottlenecks. Notice how much more of them there is than us, and how do we get around this? We're, I think, well past our time at this point. But
No, we got 10 minutes.
okay, so where we have this really attenuated life cycle, like we are going to build and someone else is going to do 508 and someone else is going to do IDLG. I kind of have a 3-pronged strategy. The first prong is visualize it so we at least understand what's being lost in terms of time, right, in that process. And also, in kind of a self-serving fashion, you're using that to deflect blame. Right? You're pointing the customer where their actual slows are, not just within your own process. Step 2 is find a belly button in each of those steps. Build a relationship with somebody in each of those other steps who will talk to you and tell you what it is that they're doing. and mirror that in your build process. So fine, some third party has to run message scans for security on our software. Cool, we're gonna do that before we give it to you too, so that we aren't surprised. So there's two things for you. One, it cuts down on the yo-yo factor, because they're gonna find less stuff, because we already found it and fixed it before we gave it to them. So when we say something we think is, I hate this phrase, dev done, we're more certain that it's dev done than we were before. So there's that. The other thing it does for you is that now you're duplicating their process automatically just as part of your build, right? Which means you can go make an argument for getting rid of them. And so step 3 is, once you can quantify that whole value stream, and you can show that we're duplicating their effort inside of the sprint, and you aren't losing any quality, right? You're actually safer because we're learning this stuff faster. Now you can make a pitch in the next compete to consolidate that work. Tear down the contractual firewall. The risk is we might not win it. Somebody else might win it instead of us. But whoever does win it is in a better position to execute than anyone was before. And ultimately, that's a win for taxpayers, even if it's not a direct win for whatever company I have been working for at the time.
That's the point. That's the key point in business. No one will do that for the better good of overall.
Well, we're pitching it all the time. I mean, we pitch it all the time, right? Because basically we get to pitch it because there's a chance we will win it, right? If we don't, oh well. I mean, these procurement processes can take so long. It might be 10 years before we know whether or not this worked out. Long term.
I would like to just say this is a great highlight of the most common problems that you must have seen in the government sector. I've never worked for the government. My more than a decade year of experience working in agile environment has been in the consumer industry, private industry, IT companies, as well as non-IT companies that have complete IT software building capabilities. And out of these, I can point out at least 4 of these myths exist very commonly in the private industry too.
Yep.
It depends on how an agile environment has been implemented and how these problems manifest themselves in a particular implementation.
Right. Yeah,
So-
it's the same with like 10 years ago CMMI stuff, right? You might have gotten some leverage out of it if you were doing it for real and you actually really wanted to use it as a tool to improve. But if you were just doing it to check a box, you didn't get anything out of it. Agile's the same way.
Well, do we, sorry,
Actually, she had a question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
It's okay. I think I forgot it, so that's okay.
Fair enough.
I was listening to his.
Well, and I guess that's sort of one of the questions that I have is, are the issues that we're seeing, right, is this a problem, right? I'm using air quotes everywhere here, but an issue with them, or is it an issue of not looking at it as a transformation of what I am doing today?
I think it's all of the above.
Okay.
Right? So you get customers who want to do one thing and contracting officers who don't want to do another. You get customers who want to do it for real, and then the vendor says, well, here's what we should really do.
Yeah.
And then whatever that is gets entrenched, and then that becomes part of contracts.
So like some of us have transformed, and then you're working for organizations who decide not to, but they want to check the box.
Yeah, it happens, right? And like I said, none of these entities are monoliths, so you might see
Yeah.
all of that inside of the same component of a customer.
Oh yeah.
Right? So it's super variable.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Just one question, please. I was curious, where have you seen scaling work and how?
Yeah. So I've seen scaling work where I'm sure by total coincidence, we weren't safe. We were less, if anything, right? So scaling, I've seen work where it's relatively still small scaling. I've seen scaling work where dependence across teams is seen as technical debt that has to be engineered away just as much as some poor piece of architecture, right? I've seen scaling work well where all of the authority to deliver to prod is still inside of that structure. However, it's portioned out across those teams. So and then of course, I've seen scaling work where teams knew what teams should be beforehand. So they'd had successful Scrum teams before. And typically they scaled fairly organically. So they were a team, and then they added some people and realized they needed to be 2 teams, and they realized maybe down the road they needed to be 3 or 4. Yeah, I have not personally seen a scaled engagement of more than, let's say, 5 teams actually work well. And I think, to be honest, I don't know how much of that is just how hard scaling makes things, and also those particular engagements have customers that are super change averse about everything that they do. So if you want to tell them you need to change the way we provision servers, it's, well, no, that's never going to happen here, right?
So I know you have there's a lot of you talk a lot about, you know, educating your customer, educating the stakeholders, and I found that a lot of times, yeah, it's great to, you know, turn around and say, you know, they're doing this wrong, these things are ridiculous, but how do you approach someone in kind of a way that is sensitive, that is not, that, because I feel there's like a barrier of fear sometimes where it's like, I can't go up to this person and tell them that this is ridiculous, and, you know, and...
Yeah, I can't. So I feel like the answer is kind of contained in your question, right? I got to talk to somebody. I got to know them. I can't just walk in and say, everything you do is crap.
Right.
Because that's also what every other BD person in town is doing too, right? They're not necessarily talking about Agile, we're talking about technology or cloud or whatever it is. But those other guys, they're all chumps. We're the only ones that have the real. Aren't we all selling the same 7 solutions? Yeah, but so what? Right? Like, you know. I got to know who they are. I got to know my customer. I got to get in there ahead of time. If I'm a large enough vendor, that probably means I have someone like me involved with solutioning and bid, as well as kind of center of excellence stuff. What we had done historically, at least until 2 weeks ago, was we kind of split acquisition and we split execution. So I owned execution, right? I owned training and coaching for projects we had. And then there was a coach like me who kind of got shunted off to do growth and be in there ahead of me. But she's also awesome, right? She's also worked all over the place. She knows this stuff. So when she goes in, she's telling them real things and having kind of ordinary conversations, and it works. On the execution side, historically, I get into trouble where my growth people are telling things that aren't necessarily true, right? When I lose fights with price to win, everybody suffers. Do people know price to win? That joke like really did not land earlier.
What was it?
Price to win. When you're bidding on work, the price to win folks, whether they're in-house or you pay some other contractor to tell you, they say, cool, what do you think is going to cost you to do this work? You're going to have to bid at 60% of that. Here's the number you're actually going to have to submit if you want to win this work. And it's always so low that there's no way you can execute that. So you have people like me saying, I can't succeed at that price. And then you have people saying, but if we don't bid that price, we won't win the work. Which to me, I don't understand why this is an argument. I don't want to win the work at that price. So, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you had a question.
Oh, I think you kind of answered it. I think it was along the lines of it, the acquisition side and understanding, you know, what people are buying these days with Agile, and similarly what I saw in the private sector where our finance people needed to be educated on all of this. Is there coaching that would be happening at the contracting level with the government to make sure that they're also getting trained to understand what these
you gotta find your levers and your wedges, right? So maybe we're gonna have a corporate on-site event to talk about how awesome we are at Agile, and I'm gonna invite my customers. And that's a way to start conversations. Maybe I'm gonna make sure that my customers understand events like Agile DC, which happen to be in their backyard and relatively cheap. And then we're going to go talk to them there, and also I'm going to sponsor the hell out of it so they see my name on it or whatever. You find your ways in to get to them to have a conversation for you. The other thing, and this is the kind of evangelist part for me, is that if we're all walking around town just trying to tell people the real, then we're making it better for everybody, right? So if someone else I know who is awesome is in there ahead of me and they happen to work for somebody else, there are lots of people in this town that I'm not worried about. If Jim walks in there and says this, it's okay, because he just wants teams to win too, right? He just wants teams to be able to deliver. That's okay. There are other folks that they're gonna, safe. We'll just do safe. Everything's fine.
Safe will save us.
Right. Okay. How are we gonna, don't worry, it's fine. Okay.
Well, and
The other change, by the way, that they've just made with their most recent framework is that now their rollout path is like a train, and it's like Candyland, like it's like a 20 stages. They, until this point, were telling everybody that you could launch in a week. Like you would train everybody inside of a week and just go. Anybody who'd done it before was like, no, it never works like that, ever.
Well, and if I could just piggyback on the response to Matthias, the other thing that I find is that sometimes the person you need to talk to is not the person you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've worked with vendors where it's like, the PM, I know that if I say some stuff, it's not going to work out.
Right.
But if I go to this other person and they go back, right? So I'll have a real conversation with this person. I'm like, we need to have this, 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 and this. But I don't know how to make them think it's their idea. You do. Go.
It's part of your KYC, know your customer
Right.
to some extent.
Well, this is the vendor I'm a sub to. Like, this isn't even my customer.
So just in closing, you guys have been great. Thanks very much. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Please, reach out on LinkedIn and connect.